Good morning. It is Thursday, August 5th. I am independent journalist Georgia Ford. Thank you so much for joining us. We're learning more about the Delta variant as more and more cases surface across the nation. What we know now is that the Delta variant is responsible for more than 80% of COVID cases nationwide. Joe Biden had a lot to say, especially in terms of the way Florida is dealing with the pandemic currently. Take a listen.
The escalation of cases is particularly concentrated in states with low vaccination rates. Just two states, Florida and Texas, account for 1/3 of all new COVID-19 cases in the entire country. Just two states. Look, we need leadership from everyone. If some governors aren't willing to do the right thing to beat this pandemic, then they should allow businesses and universities who want to do the right thing to be able to do it. I say to these governors, please help. But if you aren't going to help, at least get out of the way of the people who are trying to do the right thing. Use your power to save lives.
I know that we have talked extensively this week about children going back to school and the implications that this could have on them. Brother Mack and Ben, what are your thoughts on Biden's approach? I mean, it feels like he is putting this in the hands of governors statewide, but ultimately he does have a lot of control as the president as well.
As the commander in chief, where he knows he has power. For instance, he's mandating to the Pentagon about vaccinations and about wearing masks. So where he has control as commander-in-chief, he's flexing that control. He's respecting the fact that he cannot mandate to governors what they need to do in their state. So from that perspective, and I think that Biden is clearly following the guidelines of the CDC and Dr. Rochelle Walensky. So he's listening to the science. And as this variant mutates and changes, and according to science, when they see the new impact of it, Biden, unlike his predecessor, is making the appropriate changes. But again, I think that where he knows he has the power with employees of the federal government, because again, as commander in chief, where he can mandate to those employees, he's absolutely following the science on it.
And Ben, I know you're with us by phone. Your thoughts? Oh, I think we've lost him. Well, I want you guys to take a listen. Florida governor responded to Biden's remarks. And as many of you know, Florida's been a hot spot. DeSantis, here's his response to Biden.
Joe Biden has taken to himself to try to single out Florida over COVID. This is a guy who ran for president saying he was going to, quote, shut down the virus. And what has he done? He's imported more virus from around the world by having a wide open southern border. So his vision is, just like in New York City, restaurants should ban young kids from being able to go in because they're not eligible for vaccination, and law-abiding citizens have to produce proof of their medical records just to go to the gym or attend an event or just to participate in everyday society. He wants that, but yet if you want to vote, he thinks it's too much of a burden to show a picture ID when you're voting. So no voter ID, but have to show your medical papers just to be able to live in everyday life? Give me a break. And so I think the question is we can either have a free society or we can have a biomedical security state. And I can tell you, Florida, we're a free state. People are going to be free to choose to make their own decisions about themselves, about their families, about their kids' education, and about putting food on the table. And Joe Biden suggests that if you don't do lockdown policies, then you should, quote, get out of the way. But let me tell you this. If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it. If you're trying to deny kids a proper...
What does voting rights have to do with the pandemic?
I think it's clear. Go ahead, Georgia. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's really showing his Republican Party the fact that you have the nerve to make this pandemic about how to vote, different hoops that people have to jump through to vote. The only thing that it has to do with the other is the fact that you've been voted into this position and you are failing your state. You're failing your state. Meanwhile, while you're saying that you're trying to give parents a choice, people are dying.
But what is clear to me is the reason why the pandemic has anything to do with voting. It's apparent that DeSantis has his eyes on the Oval Office. And I think that if Trump does not run for president of the United States in 2024, he is now positioning himself to run for that office. But, the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that when you talk about Florida, we should all recognize that Florida makes up about 6% of the U.S. population. Yet 1 in 5 of the new cases of this COVID variant that is coming out in the state of Florida. So Florida is clearly a hot spot. And it is apparent that DeSantis is in a state of delusion when he talks about that. So when he makes the statement that we are a free state, well, the other thing that he needs to understand is, you're a free state, but you're an infected state. So how good is your free state when 1 in 5 of the new cases in the United States are coming out of your state? So what good is it to be free when you're infected and could potentially die?
That's right. Good morning, Georgia, and good morning, Dr. Mack. Good morning to everyone in the audience. Governor DeSantis is most certainly positioning himself to try to run for governor. He has seen that America is quite okay with the mediocrity of white men. And so he feels like this is his time to shine. He's never had this kind of opportunity to be such a lackluster leader and still be able to be considered for the presidency, because we're at an absurd time in American history where the height of your ignorance determines the altitude of your trajectory if you are a Republican. Now, there's some issues I have with the Democratic Party, and I'm going to talk about them on my time. But right now, DeSantis is exactly doing what Brother Mack said. He is leading a state with the highest rate of new infections. This is what's going on in Florida what's going across the country is atrocious. But what's underneath it is the level of ignorance that is rewarded for conservatives.
And what bothers me is, meanwhile, the cost that we're paying is people's health, people's lives. Folks really just want to get back to normal. And that is being delayed because of decisions like the one that DeSantis is making, to act like this is no big deal, to act like we haven't been dealing with this for more than a year already. At some point, it is going to require our leadership to put their foot down and to make tough decisions and to enforce, to make some requirements, whether that's continued mask mandates, whether that is all of a sudden now vaccination, proof of vaccination mandates. We have to start putting measures in place. Otherwise, as you see, we're going to get more variants, and these numbers are going to continue to increase. It's science.
Yeah.
One of the things that the governor also made a statement to, and again, he's following the playbook of Trump when he said that this new spike, and we're talking about a spike, we're talking about almost 51,000 new cases, not total cases, just new cases from the Delta variant that has appeared in his state, in the state of Florida. And so what he says is this is seasonal. And soon as I heard that seasonal, it reminded me, and I'm going to take a look at my notes, it reminded me of February 10th, 2020, when negative 45, Trump said, by April, in theory, it gets warmer and it miraculously goes away. So there's no attention to science here. He wants to just pretend that this spike is just, like he said, it's seasonal. It's not very real. It's nothing that we have to worry about. And if we go back and think about what negative 45 said in February of 2020, that this will miraculously go away. Well, 600,000+ American lives lost because he did absolutely nothing and followed the exact same, that playbook that he laid out is the exact same playbook that we're seeing DeSantis lay out. And we're clearly going to see, should he continue down that path, the devastation and the loss of lives in the state of Florida.
Yeah, that's the thing. We are talking about actual life. And I want everyone to always put into your mind that this is the way that the leadership of the conservative movement, the Republican Party, this is how they are handling your life, not just your life, but the life of your family and the life of your children. And so the fact that they are celebrating a man who is in DeSantis, they are celebrating a man who is creating policies that could literally get their children killed. They are cheering. I remember when there was a scene in the movie, in one of the Star Wars movies, where one of the protagonists said that this is how democracy ends, to thunderous applause. I had no idea that democracy would end by people applauding the death of their children. This is the sociopathy of the Republican Party.
And, Brother Ben, I also want to say this. The former governor of the state of Florida, Charlie Crist. So Charlie Crist said this about DeSantis. He says that he has a blatant disregard for the health and well-being of children and teachers. And that is clear when you look at the policy and the stance that he has taken against all science. Even if you were just ignorant to science, all you needed to do was just look at the way that Negative 45 handled the original COVID outbreak in this country. Look at the way that he handled it and look at the devastation. You don't have to go back and read books from way back when about what will happen if you ignore science and underestimate this variant, this virus.
Absolutely. I'm glad both of you touched on the way that this has been impacting children. I want you guys to listen to the governor of Florida as he was responding to the press and their questions and concerns about the virus and children. Take a listen.
Do you have any data to suggest that? Do you know if they were wearing masks? Well, they're not right. They're not eligible for the vaccination. I mean, that's not. I mean, well, so you're blaming the kids, saying they weren't wearing masks and so they're in the ICU. With all due respect, I find that deplorable. To blame a victim who ends up being hospitalized. You don't know their story. You don't know what happened with that. And this has been a really negative thing throughout this whole thing with some of these quote experts, some of the media. Somebody contracts a highly transmissible airborne virus, and they're viewed as having done something wrong. And that's just not the way you do it. When people come in, you treat them. We obviously have some people that are not vaccinated that have been admitted to hospitals. Are you going to sit there? Are you going to sit there and criticize, or are we going to try to treat and try to help the folks? I'm just sick of this judge. I'm sick of the judgmental stuff on some of this stuff. Nobody's trying to get ill here. Okay, there's people that were hermits for a year and a half that wore 6 masks and did that and still contracted it. Okay, so let's just be real here, and let's not indulge these things that somehow it's their fault for not doing it. So okay, we'll see you guys later. Thank you.
That's exactly it right there.
So DeSantis has a very reactionary approach to the pandemic and asking for there not to be judgment. Yet we heard him making judgment in his previous statement against Biden. And so for me, DeSantis, it feels like he's trying to play both sides of the fence here. And meanwhile, playing Russian roulette with the citizens who live in Florida.
Well, Georgia, there's a reason why he had a very reactionary response to that. And it's because he signed an executive order banning the requirement of children to wear masks. So in a sense, when that question was asked to him, he realized that because of his executive actions as the governor of the state, the well-being of those children could very well be placed at his decision, a decision that he made. So when he's talking about what you don't know, he is a governor, he's a politician, he's not a biologist. So what does he know about the science of it? So even if you don't believe the science, at least believe the number of deaths that have occurred in the United States, around the world, and in your state. And if somebody recommends that part of what could curtail and curtail the death due to this virus, and at the same time protect the most vulnerable children by wearing a mask, because now he's recognizing that they're not qualified to be vaccinated. Well, why is that? Because, see, he's listening to the science of the CDC and the pharmaceutical companies, which are saying that we don't know that this is ready for children at this point. So he's listening to them on that position, right, but now wants to take the political position of, as you stated, playing Russian roulette with these children's and these people's lives by saying, look, vaccines should not be mandated. Wearing the mask absolutely will not be mandated, and goes so far as to sign an executive order saying banning the requirement of children to have to wear masks. That's why he has such a negative reaction to that question.
And that's why he ran off at the end. That's why he made sure that no one could have a follow-up question. I guarantee you it is going to be completely impossible for Ron DeSantis to have enough intellectual capacity to engage in a conversation with a real journalist without running away like he did in that video, because he knows he does not have the ability to answer in good faith. They have mastered the art of gaslighting. They are gaslighting us, and they're gaslighting us with our lives. And I want to recommend to the people of Florida that are listening, homeschool your kids. Get your kids out of this system, because this governor will sit here and make the conditions for your kids to get sick. And no matter what angle you try to complain, you can't even complain, because they make it impossible for your kids to wear masks, because they are banning masks. They don't care about your kids because they know they're going to put them back in schools without a vaccine, but they're not going to require masks, and they're encouraging, or rather they're discouraging people from getting the vaccine on the back end. So they are creating the exact conditions that are going to get somebody's child killed, and it's a game to them. Take your kids out of these public schools at this point.
But see, Ben, the other thing that is important is, and that's why people have to remember, that's why, shows like what you're doing, what we're doing right here, where we can now record and have a historical record of exactly the position that DeSantis took. And when that record is clear, and you now look at the devastation, he cannot go back and lay blame on anything or anybody else. It clearly lies at his fault. So what is absolutely clear is that he will not mandate vaccinations. He will not mandate the wearing of mask. And so when this virus reaps its devastation, clearly the actions that he took will be responsible for those lives.
That's right.
And I'm glad that you brought up the point about the record and documenting, because when we reflect on this pandemic and analyze truly the effectiveness of the American government in dealing with this pandemic, I think that we're going to realize that they failed grossly. And as we are entering this season with the variant, where we're having more cases and more deaths, and it seems like we're trying to do everything we can to avoid another lockdown, we have to ask ourselves, is the political leaders who are in positions to make these decisions, are they being motivated on what's really best for Americans? Or are they being motivated on what's best for the business owners' bottom line? Who is in their ear? Who funded their campaigns? And if we're being true, if we're being honest, we know that they're not making decisions based on what's best for our health, what's best on our children. To me, this is a very American thing that we're seeing play out. We're seeing that decisions are being made based on capitalism, not on what's best for American citizens.
And Georgia, when you talk about the record, that's why I keep going back to what -45, what he said and when he said it. And just please allow me to just give you two dates here. January 22nd, 2020, -45, as President Trump said, quote, "We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China. It's going to be just fine," end quote. Then on February 24th of 2020, he said, speaking about capitalism, making money, quote, "The coronavirus is very much under control in the USA. The stock market is starting to look very good to me." So clearly, Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brother Mack. No, I'm sorry. I thought that was go ahead. Finish the thought.
No, that's pretty much it. So again, when we're talking about keeping this record, we have to keep a record of just how the leadership, and I'm reminded of one of the world leaders who came, and I don't know if the brother came from Greece or if he came from Italy. But when he came here and they asked him about how devastating the outbreak of the coronavirus was in his country, he said, and at the time, it wasn't as devastating. The devastation hadn't come even close to what we now know it to be. But in the early stages, when Negative 45 was making these statements, they asked that leader, is there any advice that you would give to the United States? And he said, do not underestimate COVID. Do not underestimate it. And it is clear that is exactly what Negative 45 did. That is exactly what DeSantis is doing. And that is exactly what many Republican governors are doing. That's exactly what the Republican Party is doing. They underestimated COVID. They're clearly underestimating the new variant.
And the reason they're underestimating it is exactly what you said, Georgia. They have made a cost-benefit analysis. I don't know if you remember the fabled story that is rooted in true. It's a true story about the cars and the cost-benefit analysis that was made by a particular car company in the past that made the decision to not make the changes on vehicles that gave them safety, because the cost of making those changes would be greater than the cost of the lawsuits associated with death. There are companies and politicians. Ron DeSantis is one. The Republican Party and Donald Trump, they are all a part of a system that has made a cost-benefit analysis. It is more profitable for you to go back to work in the pandemic and for your kids to go to school unprotected for them if you die than it is for us to shut down and protect lives.
Mm-hmm. You know, in a sense, Ben, it almost seems as though that's the price they're willing to pay to, quote unquote, reach herd immunity. Let's just let enough, if enough of us get sick, if enough folks get infected, understand the devastation that'll take place. But then once that happens, the worst of the storm is past, and we now have reached herd immunity at the expense of people whose lives we could have saved if we had prompted and kept pounding the table about getting a vaccination as a nation, not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but as a nation of leaders who care about the well-being of human lives, if all collectively came together. Because if ever there is an issue in which common ground is needed, it is on the health and well-being of this nation. And clearly that is not the case.
That's right.
And in dealing with the variant, the Delta variant, I have not heard a lot about herd immunity. I mean, before the vaccination really rolled out, we heard that was the only thing we heard people talking about was how can we get to herd immunity? Well, now it seems like that is definitely not their motivation. Ben, you're absolutely correct that there's been a cost benefit analysis and they don't want to shut down because there were so many businesses, and not saying that I do either, but I don't want to get sick. I don't want my children to get sick either. And so how has a nation, created a process in order to make decisions that's based on monetary gain and not on people's lives or their health? The morale of America has eroded so much due to capitalism that we are prolonging this pandemic week after week, month after month. And the scientists have laid it out. It's very simple. But at the end of the day, we have elected governors who refuse to do the right thing, who refuse to put mandates in place to keep us safe. Because at the end of the day, I think that they're more committed to their friends, their buddies' bottom line than they are on our safety.
Well, Georgia, I'd also say this. They're more driven by the polls. If they have a base, a constituency that is anti-mask, anti-vaccination, they're going to go down that path. Now, when you talk about not having heard much about herd immunity with the new variant, it's because I'm not sure, and again, I'm not sure that the CDC or the pharmaceutical companies are absolutely confident that the current vaccine works against the new variant. So when they get to that point of understanding that it works against the new variant, then I think at that point, they'll make the analysis of how many people need to be vaccinated before we can now reach herd immunity. But I think that's why we're not hearing about herd immunity right now, because we're not sure that the current vaccines that are in place are effective against the new variant.
And when you realize that, you guys, this is all, excuse my language, it's just a big ass experiment at this point. You know, I mean, at what point do you realize that we are in the petri dish, that we're under the microscope, and it's just a big experiment with our lives? That's really what it's starting to feel like, because there's so many uncontrolled variables, unpredicted variables that these scientists couldn't anticipate. And now we're here and they're back trying to figure it out.
Well, but listen, Georgia, in truth, that is what science is. Science is a big experiment. And the great gains that we have, the big medical breakthroughs that we have experienced in the world, not just in this country, but in the world, it started because somebody identified a problem. Then they began to understand all the variables that attributed to that problem. And then one by one, you have to change those variables with the intent of trying to get to your desired results. So as this virus keeps mutating, those variables keep changing. So it seems that some of us, that we think that scientists just ought to have the answers. We don't. And I'm saying we because to some degree, as an engineer, I'm in that science community. That is what you have to do. You have to, as quickly as you can, but as safely as you can, you have to keep testing, looking at the variables. And again, because this virus, it cares about preserving itself. It is going to continue to mutate. And as it mutates, it's developing defense mechanisms against whatever it is that we had as a vaccine. So as these variables keep changing, we have to keep trying. But to the point, had all of us, as a country, we did what they did in communist China. And again, they were able to do it in communist China because it is a communist government. When they said, don't come outside, they're not asking you not to come outside. They're telling you not to come outside. And there will be dire consequences if you disobey a communist government. But because we're in the system we are, of personal liberties and the likes, and we did not listen to the science of it all. Here we are a year and a half later, or a year plus later, not where we all think we should have been, and maybe where we could have been had we listened to the science at that time.
Absolutely.
Ben, if you're, I was going to say, if you're still with us and we get ready to wrap up here, what are your closing thoughts, especially on how parents should be thinking about this as they prepare to send their kids back to school?
Well, I was trying to keep myself on mute so that you guys wouldn't hear all of the ambient sounds of the South, and it ties directly with what I think we should do. I'm organizing across the South, and I'm connecting with people, particularly because we have to do what we have to do to protect our kids. The government won't. And I'm not leaving the safety of my children in the hands of sociopaths who are going to put the profits of companies over our children. So organize. Meet your neighbors, make sure that your neighbors are vaccinated, and then create a pod so that you can have some type of homeschooling with your community, safe, vaccinated homeschooling, so that you don't have to put your family's life at risk in the hands of people like Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump.
Absolutely. Well, we are on the clock. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Stick around for more on The Benjamin Dixon Show.